The security guard laughed right in my face. "Nice try, ma'am, but I see the CEO's wife every single day." He pointed across the lobby. "There she is now." That's when my world tilted sideways, because walking through those glass doors with a designer handbag and my husband's favorite coffee wasn't some stranger. It was my sister Sarah. "Where are you watching from today? Drop your location in the comments below and hit that like and subscribe button." Let me back up and explain how I got to this moment of pure humiliation. 3 months earlier, my husband David had gotten the promotion of his dreams, CEO of Henderson & Associates, a prestigious downtown firm. The catch? The company was 2 hours from our suburban home. "It's temporary," he'd assured me, kissing my forehead like I was a child. "Just until we figure out the logistics." I'm Margaret Foster, 52 years old, and apparently naive enough at my age to believe that 3 months of weekend visits and daily phone calls would be enough to keep a 28-year marriage intact. David had always been charming, the kind of man who remembered anniversary dates and brought flowers for no reason, the kind who made other wives envious at dinner parties. At 54, he was still devastatingly handsome, with salt and pepper hair and the kind of confidence that came from years of success. "Maggie," he'd say in that warm voice that used to make my knees weak, "you know I'd never do anything to hurt us. This job is for our future." Our future. What a joke that turned out to be. Sarah had been my constant companion through those lonely months. My younger sister by 4 years, she'd moved back to town 9 months ago when her marriage to Richard started falling apart. "Just temporarily," she'd said, echoing David's favorite phrase. She'd curl up on my couch with wine and tissues, crying about her husband's emotional distance while I rubbed her back and made supportive noises. "Men are such liars," she'd sob. "How do you know David isn't changing up there in the big city?" I'd laugh it off. My David wasn't like that. My David called every night at exactly 8 o'clock. My David sent sweet text messages and promised to come home every Friday. The irony wasn't lost on me now. Over the years, David had gradually trained me not to ask too many questions about work. "Business is boring." "Sweetheart," he'd say, whenever I showed interest in his projects. "Let me handle the stress so you don't have to." He'd made me feel protected, sheltered from the complicated world of corporate politics. Now I realized he'd been training me to be the perfect mark. I'd planned the surprise for weeks. David's 54th birthday was coming up, and I wanted to do something special. Something that would remind him why he married me in the first place. I'd gotten his assistant's number from his business cards and convinced her to help me coordinate the surprise. I'd bought a new dress, blue, his favorite color, and made reservations at that Italian restaurant he'd mentioned loving. Sarah had been so supportive. "That's such a sweet idea," she'd gushed. "David is lucky to have someone who cares so much." She'd even helped me pick out the dress, insisting the blue one was perfect. "It brings out your eyes," she'd said. Now, standing in that marble lobby watching my sister chat with the security guard like they were old friends, I realized she'd been right about one thing. Men are liars. She'd just forgotten to mention that sometimes women are too. The guard was still talking. "Mrs. Henderson comes by every day around this time. Real nice lady, always has coffee for her husband." Mrs. Henderson. My married name, my identity. Being worn by my sister like a costume. Sarah finally noticed me standing there. For just a second, her face went completely white. Then, like the actress she'd always been, she recovered. "Maggie!" she called out, walking toward me with arms outstretched. "What a surprise! What are you doing here?" What was I doing here? I was discovering that my entire life was a lie. "I came to surprise David for his birthday," I managed to say, though my voice sounded like it was coming from underwater. Sarah's face did this little twitch, barely noticeable unless you'd known her your whole life like I had. "Oh, honey," she said, reaching for my arm. "Didn't David tell you? He had to fly to Chicago this morning. Emergency client meeting." Her voice was smooth as silk, but I caught the slight tremor. Sarah had never been as good a liar as she thought she was. The security guard looked confused. "But ma'am, Mr. Henderson is upstairs. I saw him go up an hour ago." Sarah shot him a look that could have frozen hell over. "You must be mistaken, Tom." Tom. She knew his name. Of course she did. I was beginning to understand how much planning had gone into this deception. "Actually," Tom continued, bless his honest heart, I was just telling your sister here how you come by every day. Mrs. Henderson, right? He looked between us, finally seeing the family resemblance. Wait, are you two sisters? The silence stretched like a piano wire about to snap. This is awkward, Sarah laughed, but it sounded forced. Maggie, maybe we should talk privately. Oh, we're going to talk, I said. But first, I'm going upstairs to wish my husband happy birthday. Sarah grabbed my elbow. Maggie, please, let me explain. Explain what? Explain why you know the security guard's name? Explain why you're carrying coffee for my husband? Or maybe you want to explain why he thinks you're Mrs. Henderson? People were starting to stare. A woman in a power suit paused by the elevator, clearly listening. Two men in expensive suits had slowed their conversation to watch our drama unfold. Ladies, Tom interrupted nervously, maybe you should take this somewhere private? Sarah was gripping my arm now, her perfectly manicured nails digging in. Maggie, you don't understand. It's not what you think. Really. Because what I think is that you've been playing house with my husband while I've been home feeling sorry for you about your marriage problems. My voice was getting louder, but I didn't care. What I think is that every night when he called me at 8 o'clock, you were probably sitting right there listening. The color drained from Sarah's face completely. That's not— Ladies! A voice boomed across the lobby. I turned to see David stepping out of the elevator, straightening his tie. His face went through about 6 different expressions in 2 seconds. Surprise, panic, guilt, and then something that almost looked like relief. Maggie, he said, walking toward us with that easy confidence I'd fallen in love with 28 years ago. What a wonderful surprise. He leaned in to kiss my cheek, like everything was perfectly normal, like his wife and his mistress meeting in his office lobby was just another Tuesday. But I stepped back. Happy birthday, darling, I said sweetly. I brought you a present. David's eyes darted to Sarah, then back to me. You didn't have to— Oh, but I did. I brought you the gift of truth. I looked around the lobby at all the people pretending not to listen. You see, I was going to surprise you with dinner and a romantic evening. Instead, I get to surprise you with the fact that I know you've been screwing my sister. The lobby went dead silent. David's charming mask finally slipped. Maggie, please, David said, his voice dropping to that concerned, reasonable tone he used when he wanted to make me feel like I was being irrational. Let's not do this here. Why not here? I asked, looking around at our audience. These people should know what kind of man they're working for. Sarah was tugging on my other arm now. Maggie, you're making a scene. Am I? Because I thought I was just having a conversation with my husband and my sister. You know, family time. A woman in her 30s approached us hesitantly. Excuse me, are you Mrs. Henderson? I'm Rebecca from accounting. I've heard so much about you. Sarah opened her mouth, but I beat her to it. No, sweetie, that's Mrs. Henderson. I pointed to Sarah. I'm just the actual wife. Rebecca's eyes went wide. Oh my God! David stepped forward, his CEO persona kicking in. Rebecca, why don't you head back upstairs? This is a family matter. Right, Rebecca said, backing away slowly. I'll just pretend this never happened. You do that, I called after her. But maybe mention to HR that your CEO has been introducing his mistress as his wife. I'm sure they'll find it fascinating. David's face was turning an interesting shade of red. Margaret, that's enough. Margaret, not Maggie. He only used my full name when he was really angry. Well, join the club, sweetie. Is it enough? Because I don't think it is. I turned to Sarah. How long? She was crying now. Real tears, not the crocodile tears she'd been shedding on my couch for months. Maggie, I never meant for this to happen. How long? I repeated. 7 months, she whispered. 7 months. I did the math in my head. So you started sleeping with my husband before you even filed for divorce from Richard. Sarah's sob echoed through the marble lobby. And you? I turned to David. When exactly were you planning to tell me? After you'd fully moved your girlfriend into your new life? She's not my girlfriend, David said, which was exactly the wrong thing to say. You're right, I said. Girlfriends are for single men. Mistresses are for married men who lie to their wives. Tom the security guard cleared his throat. Folks, maybe you could— Don't worry, Tom, I said. I'm leaving. But first, I want you to know something. For the past 3 months, every time this woman came in here claiming to be Mrs. Henderson, she was lying. I'm Mrs. Henderson, Margaret Foster Henderson, and I've been married to that man for 28 years. Tom looked mortified. Ma'am, I'm so sorry. I had no idea. Of course you didn't. They fooled you completely. Sarah's been using fake ID and forged documents to get past security. I looked at my sister. Isn't that right, Sarah? Sarah's face crumpled further. The fake Mrs. Henderson persona was dissolving in front of everyone. Maggie, wait! Sarah called after me as I started walking toward the exit. I stopped and turned around one last time. The lobby was completely silent, except for the click of my heels on the marble. You know what the funny part is? I said loud enough for everyone to hear. For months, you've been crying on my shoulder about Richard's betrayal, telling me how men can't be trusted, how they're all liars and cheats. I paused for effect. At least you were half right. Then I walked out of that building and into the rest of my life. The drive home was a blur. I white-knuckled the steering wheel and tried to process what had just happened. 28 years. Gone. Just like that. My sister, my baby sister who I'd protected her entire life, had stolen my husband and my identity. My phone started ringing before I'd even pulled into my driveway. David, of course. I let it go to voicemail. Then it rang again. Sarah this time. Voicemail. Then David again. I turned the phone off. Inside the house, our house, though I guess it was just my house now, everything looked exactly the same. The wedding photo on the mantel, still smiling like idiots. David's coffee mug in the sink. Sarah's wine glass from last night when we'd shared a bottle, and she'd cried about how lonely she was. The wine glass went first, right into the trash can with a satisfying crash. Then I sat on the couch where Sarah had spent countless hours playing the victim, and I started to laugh. Not happy laughter, the kind of laughter that bubbles up when your brain can't quite process how spectacularly stupid you've been. 7 months. I'd spent 7 months feeling sorry for my sister while she was living my life. 7 months of, "How was your day, darling?" phone calls while she was probably lying naked next to him. 7 months of weekend visits where David seemed distracted and tired, because he was probably exhausted from juggling 2 women. My phone buzzed. I'd forgotten I'd only turned off the sound, not the power. A text from Sarah. "Please let me explain." Oh, she wanted to explain. Perfect. I turned the sound back on and called her. "Maggie, thank God." "Start talking," I said. "And Sarah, don't you dare lie to me, not anymore." I could hear her crying. "I never meant for this to happen. When I moved in with you 9 months ago, I was so broken. Richard was filing for divorce, and when David would call, sometimes I'd answer because you were in the shower or busy. When did it start? The feelings or the physical part? Both." A long pause. "The feelings started after about 2 weeks. He was so kind to me, Maggie. He'd ask how I was doing, really listen. Richard never listened to me like that. And the physical part? The weekend you went to Mom's funeral. I nearly dropped the phone. Mom's funeral was 7 months ago. I know. 7 months. My mother's funeral, where I'd driven 5 hours to bury the woman who'd raised us both, where I'd held Sarah while she sobbed about how alone she felt. David had stayed home because of work, or so he'd said. You slept with my husband the weekend I buried our mother. Maggie, I was devastated, we both were. It just happened. It just happened 7 months ago, and it's been happening ever since." Yes, at least she was being honest now. Sort of. "And the divorce from Richard? You told me you filed 2 months ago." Another pause. "Richard filed 8 months ago. It was finalized last month." "So you lied about that too." I was embarrassed. "Richard found out about..." She trailed off. "About what?" "About an affair I had with his business partner. That's why he filed for divorce so quickly. So Sarah had a pattern of sleeping with unavailable men." "Wonderful. Sarah?" "Yes?" "Don't ever contact me again." I hung up and threw the phone across the room. It hit the wedding photo, sending glass cascading across the hardwood floor. Perfect. Everything was broken now. That's when I realized something that should have scared me, but instead felt oddly liberating. I had absolutely nothing left to lose. The next morning I woke up on the couch surrounded by tissues and empty wine bottles. My head felt like someone had used it for batting practice, and my mouth tasted like I'd been gargling with regret. But for the first time in months, my mind was crystal clear. I had work to do. First stop, Helen Morrison, the best divorce attorney in town. I'd Googled her at 3 in the morning after the wine had worn off. She specialized in high-asset divorces with significant deception factors. Perfect. Helen's office was everything you'd expect from someone who charged $500 an hour. Leather furniture, degrees on every wall, and a receptionist who looked like she could intimidate a Supreme Court justice. "Mrs. Henderson," Helen said, shaking my hand with a grip that could crack walnuts. "I understand your husband has been creative with the truth." I told her everything, the whole sordid story. Helen took notes without once looking shocked, which either said something about her professionalism or the general state of humanity. "How long has he been at this new position?" she asked. 3 months. "And his salary?" I told her. Her eyebrows went up slightly. "Stock options?" "Yes." "Property?" "The house is in both our names. He has a 401k, some investments. And now, whatever this new job comes with." Helen was scribbling furiously. "And your sister. Have you verified her divorce status? She says Richard finalized it last month, 8 months after he filed. We'll need to verify that independently. And Mrs. Henderson, based on what you've told me, I think we need to do some serious financial investigation." 3 hours later, I walked out of Helen's office with a private investigator's card and a court date for temporary orders. Helen's people were going to dig into David's finances, verify Sarah's story, and something called asset tracing. "Mrs. Henderson," Helen had said as I was leaving, "in cases like this, people often discover their spouse has been hiding assets for longer than they realize. Be prepared for some surprises." Surprises. As if I hadn't had enough surprises for one lifetime. My phone had been buzzing all morning. 23 missed calls from David, 15 from Sarah, a few from numbers I didn't recognize, probably David's lawyer or his assistant. I ignored them all. Instead, I drove to the bank. "I'd like to check the balance on all our accounts," I told the teller. What I found made my blood run cold. The checking account that should have had about $15,000 had $300. The savings account was completely empty. The investment account we'd been building for retirement had been liquidated 2 months ago. "Where did the money go?" I asked. The teller pulled up the records. It looks like there were several large transfers to an account under Henderson Holdings LLC. Henderson Holdings, David's company? Or something else entirely? "Can you tell me when these transfers started?" The first one was 18 months ago. Small amounts at first, then larger ones in the past 6 months. 18 months. David had been stealing from us for a year and a half, long before the fake promotion. This wasn't a recent decision, it was a long-term plan. I drove home in a daze. David had been methodically draining our accounts while I trusted him completely. The promotion, the move, the charming phone calls. It had all been theater, a performance to keep me calm while he dismantled our entire financial life. When I pulled into the driveway, Sarah's car was parked in my spot. She was sitting on my front steps, makeup smeared, looking like she'd slept in her clothes. When she saw me, she jumped up. "Maggie, please, we need to talk." "We talked yesterday. You hung up on me. I should have hung up 30 years ago." Sarah followed me to the door. "Please, 5 minutes. That's all I'm asking." Against my better judgment, I let her in. "I need to tell you something about David," she said the moment we were inside. "Something I should have told you yesterday." "What now?" Sarah took a shaky breath. "He's not really the CEO of Henderson and Associates." The world tilted again. "What do you mean?" "I mean, he's been lying to both of us." "Sarah," I said very slowly, "sit down." She perched on the edge of the couch like she was ready to run. Smart girl. "David didn't get promoted to CEO of Henderson and Associates, did he?" Her face went white. "No, he started his own consulting firm called Henderson Holdings about 2 years ago. He's been using that to con people. 2 years. Not 18 months like the bank records suggested. He'd been planning this even longer." "What exactly did he tell you?" "He said his consulting business needed private investors to expand, that we'd be partners in building something amazing." Sarah's voice broke. "I gave him my divorce settlement, Maggie. All of it." "How much?" $250,000. I felt sick. "When?" 4 months ago. He said once the business took off, we'd have enough money to start fresh somewhere new. The pieces were clicking into place. David wasn't just cheating. He was running an elaborate investment scam, using his charm to convince women to give him money. "Sarah, how many other women do you think he's doing this to?" She stared at me. "Other women?" I pulled out my phone and started Googling. It didn't take long to find what I was looking for. Henderson and Associates is a real company. Want to know who their CEO is? Sarah shook her head, but I told her anyway. Robert Martinez, 63 years old, been with the company for 20 years. Their website shows him in board meetings from last month. Sarah was crying again, but this time it looked like real devastation instead of manipulation. So David isn't a CEO at all? David is a con man, and we're both his victims. My phone rang. David again. This time I answered and put it on speaker. "Hello, sweetheart," I said in my sweetest voice. "How's the fake CEO business today?" Silence. "Maggie, we need to talk." "Oh, we're way past talking. But I do have some questions, like how many other women have you convinced to invest in Henderson Holdings?" "That's not—" "Sarah's here with me." "David. She told me about the $250,000. Are there others?" The line went quiet for a long moment. "David," I continued, "I'm sitting here with Sarah. We've both figured out your little game, and my lawyer is already investigating your finances. So you have a choice. You can tell us the truth now, or you can explain it to the FBI later." "Maggie, please, let me explain. Explain how you've been running investment fraud for 2 years? Explain how you forged my signature on financial documents? Or maybe explain how you've been using my sister's emotional vulnerability to steal her money?" I heard him take a deep breath. "There are others." "How many others?" 4, including Sarah. 4 other women. I felt Sarah's sharp intake of breath. "Here's what's going to happen," I said. "You're going to transfer every penny back into our joint accounts. You're going to give me the names and contact information for every woman you've defrauded. And you're going to turn yourself in to the authorities. And if I don't, then I call the FBI myself. Did you know that investment fraud is a federal crime? Each count carries up to 20 years in prison." Another long silence. "I need time. You have 24 hours to put our money back. After that, I'm calling the police." I hung up and looked at Sarah, who was staring at me like she'd never seen me before. "What are you going to do?" she asked. "I'm going to get my life back, and I'm going to make sure David can't do this to anyone else." Sarah wiped her eyes. "Maggie, I'm so sorry. I know sorry doesn't fix anything, but you're right. Sorry doesn't fix this. But helping me stop him might be a start." For the first time since this nightmare began, I saw something like hope in my sister's eyes. Helen Morrison called at exactly 12:30 the next afternoon. "Mrs. Henderson, your husband just transferred $643,000 into your joint checking account." I blinked. 643? That's more than he took from us. Apparently, Mr. Henderson has been more entrepreneurial than we thought. My investigator found evidence of at least 4 other investors in Henderson Holdings. 4 other women, just like he'd admitted. "Helen, exactly how much trouble is David in? Legally? He could be looking at wire fraud, securities fraud, and investment fraud charges. Each carries a potential sentence of up to 20 years. And what about the forged documents? We found evidence of forged signatures on the second mortgage documents for your house and several falsified bank authorizations. That adds identity theft and bank fraud to the charges. A second mortgage on my house, without my knowledge. The violation felt almost worse than the cheating. Helen, I want to meet the other women. Mrs. Henderson, that might not be advisable. They deserve to know what happened to them. And I think together, we might be able to ensure David faces real consequences." 3 hours later, Helen's investigator, Marcus Webb, was sitting in my living room with Sarah and me, explaining the scope of David's operation. "Your husband is what we call a romance scammer, but more sophisticated," Marcus said. "He targets middle-aged women going through transitions, divorce, death of a spouse, career changes. He presents himself as successful and charming, gains their trust, then convinces them to invest in his businesses." Marcus opened a thick file and spread out photographs and documents. Jennifer Walsh, 55, recently divorced from a wealthy doctor. She gave him $80,000 8 months ago. Amanda Torres, 49, widowed 2 years ago. She invested $120,000 last year. Christina Bell, 53, early retirement from teaching. $67,000 5 months ago. I studied the photos. All attractive women. All around my age. All looking hopeful in their pictures. How did he meet them? Online dating sites, divorced women's support groups, widows' grief counseling groups. He's very strategic about targeting vulnerability. What about offshore accounts? Marcus pulled out bank records. Cayman Islands and Switzerland. He's been moving money systematically over the past 2 years, probably preparing for a final exit when the scheme got too complicated to maintain. How much total? Including your money and Sarah's, we estimate he's stolen nearly $1.2 million over 2 years. Sarah made a choking sound. 12 people's life savings. 5 women, I corrected. But you're right about the life savings part. Marcus leaned forward. Mrs. Henderson, these women don't know about each other. They each think they're his only investor, his special partner. Just like I thought I was his only wife, and Sarah thought she was his only lover. Sarah flinched, but nodded. Marcus, I want to contact them. What exactly are you planning? I thought about that security guard pointing across the lobby. About the moment when my entire world revealed itself to be a lie. About 28 years of, Maggie, you're being paranoid, and Maggie, trust me. I'm planning to give David the biggest surprise of his life. Marcus grinned. I like the way you think. But Mrs. Henderson will need to be careful. If David suspects we're organizing his victims, he might run. Then we'll have to be smarter than him. Sarah looked up from the photos. What do you need me to do? It was the first time she'd asked how she could help instead of asking for forgiveness. Maybe there was hope for us after all. You're going to help me contact these women. And then we're all going to have a conversation with David that he'll never forget. 3 days later, I was sitting in a coffee shop downtown with 3 women I'd never met, but who'd all been intimate with my husband, emotionally, if not physically. The conversation was exactly as surreal as you'd expect. So he told you he was a CEO too? Jennifer Walsh asked. She was elegant in that understated way that comes from old money and good breeding, wearing a simple sweater that probably cost more than my car payment. Henderson and Associates, I confirmed, complete with business cards and a downtown office address. Morrison Investment Group for me, Jennifer said. He had a whole website set up, professional photos, fake client testimonials. Amanda Torres laughed bitterly. At least you got fake companies. He told me he was a pharmaceutical consultant working on breakthrough cancer treatments. Said his late wife died of cancer and he was dedicating his life to helping other families. Christina Bell looked up from her coffee with fire in her eyes. Grief counseling group for me too. Claimed he was a widowed sports medicine doctor developing rehabilitation technology for veterans. Had me convinced I was funding something that would help wounded soldiers. The sophistication was breathtaking. David hadn't just been lying. He'd been researching each woman's vulnerabilities and crafting specific fantasies to exploit them. How much did you each give him? I asked. Jennifer. $80,000 over 6 months. He said he needed bridge funding while waiting for venture capital approval. Amanda. $120,000. I liquidated my husband's 401k because David convinced me the cancer research was on the verge of a breakthrough. Christina. $67,000. My entire early retirement savings. I thought I was investing in something that would honor my late brother, who was a veteran. Each story was a masterpiece of emotional manipulation. David had studied these women, learned their pain points, and crafted elaborate lies to exploit their desire to do good. Ladies, I said, we've been victimized by a world-class predator. The question is, Jennifer said, her voice hard with suppressed anger, what do we do about it? Over the next hour, we shared more than just our financial losses. We shared the emotional devastation of discovering that someone we'd trusted, someone we'd been intimate with emotionally, had been calculating and cold. I haven't been able to trust anyone since I figured it out, Amanda said. My own daughter thinks I'm becoming paranoid. I stopped going to grief counseling, Christina added. If David could fool me there, who else is lying? I felt a surge of protective anger for these women. David hadn't just stolen money, he'd stolen their ability to trust again. Here's what I think we should do, I said. We're going to confront him, all of us, together. Jennifer looked skeptical. Why would he agree to meet with all of us? I smiled. Because he won't know you're coming. The plan was simple, but required careful coordination. David had been texting me non-stop, begging for a chance to explain everything and work things out. I'd finally agreed to meet him for dinner at Romano's, the Italian restaurant where we'd had our first date 30 years ago. Sentimental manipulation at its finest. What David didn't know was that Jennifer, Amanda and Christina would already be at Romano's when we arrived. Marcus Webb would be recording everything from a corner table with professional equipment, and Sarah would be outside as backup in case David tried to run. "What if he recognizes us?" Christina asked. "He might," I admitted, "but that's part of the point. I want him to see all of us together and realize that his carefully compartmentalized world is falling apart." Amanda leaned forward. "And then what? He apologizes and we all feel better? Then we give him a choice. He can cooperate with the FBI investigation and help us recover everyone's money. Or he can face federal charges without any plea deal possibility." Jennifer smiled for the first time since I'd met her. "I like it. When do we do this?" "Tomorrow night," I said. "Ladies, it's time to take our power back." Friday night arrived with the kind of crisp autumn air that used to make me feel romantic. Now, it just felt like justice. I arrived at Romano's 15 minutes early and found the other women already positioned around the restaurant. Jennifer was at the bar, looking like she was waiting for a date. Amanda sat alone near the window with a book, appearing to enjoy a quiet dinner. Christina was at a corner table with Marcus, playing the role of a business colleague discussing contracts. At exactly 7 o'clock, David walked in wearing the navy suit I'd bought him for his birthday 2 years ago. He looked nervous, but hopeful, like a man who thought he might still be able to salvage something from the wreckage. "Maggie," he said, kissing my cheek, "you look beautiful." "Thank you. You look like a lying, cheating con man, but the suit is nice." David's smile faltered, but he pulled out my chair. "I know you're angry. David, before we start talking, there are some people I'd like you to meet." I gestured to Jennifer, who stood up from the bar and walked over. David's face went white. "Jennifer Walsh," I said pleasantly. "I believe you two know each other?" David's eyes darted around the restaurant, finally recognizing Amanda and Christina. "What is this?" "This is accountability," Jennifer said, pulling out a chair and sitting down. "Something you've been avoiding for quite some time." Amanda approached from her table. "Hello, David. Remember me? Amanda Torres, the widow whose husband's life insurance money you stole for your fake cancer research?" David was looking around wildly now, probably calculating exit routes, and realizing Sarah was standing by the front door. Christina joined us last, her voice deadly calm. "Christina Bell, you convinced me to cash out my retirement to fund fake veteran rehabilitation programs." The restaurant had gone quiet around us. Other diners were pretending not to stare, but the drama was too compelling to ignore. "Please sit down, David," I said. "We have so much to discuss." David sat heavily, trapped by 4 women and the weight of his own lies. "Ladies," I continued, "I think it's time David explained his business model." "Maggie, please," David started, but Jennifer cut him off. "Actually, David, I have a question. When you were telling me about your late wife's cancer battle, were you thinking about the $80,000 I'd given you? Or were you genuinely enjoying the performance?" David's mouth opened and closed soundlessly. "Wait," Amanda said, leaning forward. "You told me your wife died of cancer, too. Same story? Different victim?" "He told me he was a widower as well," Christina added. Apparently being married to Margaret didn't fit his narrative. I watched David's face cycle through emotions. Panic, shame, and then something that looked almost like resignation. "You don't understand," he said finally. "I never meant for anyone to get hurt." "Then where's our money?" Jennifer demanded. "The business ventures didn't work out." "What business ventures?" Amanda's voice rose. "The cancer research that doesn't exist? The investment firm that's just a P.O. box? The sports medicine company that's registered to your home address?" David looked genuinely surprised. "How did you—" "We hired professionals, David," I said. "People who are much better at investigating than you are at lying." Marcus Webb stood up from his corner table, pulling out his private investigator credentials. "Mr. Henderson, I think it's time we discussed federal crimes." As Marcus began explaining the charges David was facing, I watched my husband of 28 years finally confront the magnitude of his deceptions. Wire fraud, securities fraud, identity theft, bank fraud. The list went on. "Ladies," Marcus continued, "Mr. Henderson has a choice. He can cooperate fully with federal investigators, help recover the stolen funds, and potentially receive a reduced sentence. Or he can face the full weight of federal prosecution." David looked around the table at 4 women whose lives he'd destroyed. "What do you want from me?" "We want our money back," Jennifer said simply. "We want you to face consequences," Amanda added. "And we want to make sure you can't do this to anyone else," Christina finished. I leaned forward. "David, you have 24 hours to decide. Cooperate or face 20 years in federal prison." For the first time since I'd known him, David Henderson looked like a defeated man. 2 weeks later, David signed a plea agreement with federal prosecutors. He would serve 8 years in prison and pay full restitution to all victims. The offshore accounts yielded enough money to cover everyone's losses with interest. But more importantly, the four of us had formed something unexpected, a friendship forged in shared survival. 18 months later, I was standing in the conference room of our new consulting firm, Truth Seekers, watching Amanda give a presentation to a room full of federal agents about romance scam prevention. Jennifer was handling our legal affairs. Christina managed our outreach programs, and I oversaw investigations. What had started as 4 women seeking justice had become something much larger, a resource for other fraud victims and a thorn in the side of con artists everywhere. "Margaret," Christina called from her desk, "we've got another case. Woman in Phoenix, similar pattern to what David did to us." I walked over to review the file. Nancy Rodriguez, 56, recently divorced. She'd met a charming man online who claimed to be a doctor working overseas. He needed money for emergency medical equipment. The story was different, but the manipulation was identical. "Set up a call with her," I said. "Let's see how we can help." My phone buzzed with a text from Robert Chen, the man I'd been dating for 6 months. We'd met at one of my financial literacy seminars, where he'd approached me afterward and said, "I'm an accountant who lost his wife to cancer. You're a fraud investigator who lost your husband to crime. Want to compare spreadsheets over coffee?" It was the most honest pickup line I'd ever heard. Robert's text read, "Dinner tonight? I'll cook. Fair warning, I'm making my famous lasagna and you know what that does to your willpower." I smiled and typed back, "My willpower is excellent. It's my restraint that's questionable." 6 months of dating an aggressively honest man had taught me the difference between charm and authenticity. Robert showed me his tax returns on our 3rd date. "You deserve to know what you're getting into." He introduced me to his adult children on our 2nd month. They should meet the woman who's making their father smile again. He was the opposite of David in every way that mattered. Sarah walked into the office carrying coffee and looking healthier than I'd seen her in years. After 18 months of therapy and making amends, she'd become our office manager. It wasn't the same relationship we'd had before. That innocent trust was gone forever, but it was something new, something built on honesty instead of assumption. "Maggie," she said, using the nickname she'd earned back through months of proving herself trustworthy. "The reporter from 60 Minutes called. They want to do a follow-up story on David's sentencing." I considered it. The publicity had been good for business, but I wasn't interested in revisiting that particular nightmare. "Tell them no. Our focus is forward, not backward." Sarah nodded. "Also, Jennifer wants to know if you're free for lunch. She's got news about the Peterson case." The Peterson case was our biggest investigation yet, a man who'd defrauded 12 women across 4 states. Jennifer had been tracking him for months. "Tell her yes, conference room at noon." As Sarah walked away, I looked around our office. Photos on the walls showed our success stories, women who'd recovered their money, men who'd been prosecuted for fraud, families who'd been reunited after con artists had torn them apart. On my desk sat a framed newspaper article. 4 women turn personal tragedy into business success. The photos showed us at our grand opening, standing together in front of our Truth Seekers sign. Jennifer with her elegant composure, Amanda with her fierce determination, Christina with her protective fire, and me, Margaret Foster, survivor. My phone rang. Robert's name on the caller ID. "Hey there," I answered. "Hey yourself. I just finished reviewing the quarterly reports you asked for. Your business is growing faster than we projected. Good problems to have. The best kind. So tonight, my place or yours?" I looked out the window at the city where I'd lived my entire life, where I'd been married for 28 years to a man I'd never really known, where I'd built a new life from the ashes of betrayal. "Yours," I said, "but I'm bringing dessert." "What kind?" "The kind that proves I'm full of surprises." Robert laughed. "Margaret Foster, you continue to amaze me." Margaret Foster, not Margaret Henderson. Never again. After hanging up, I reviewed my schedule for the rest of the day. 3 client calls, a meeting with the FBI about a new case, and dinner with a man who'd shown me his credit report before he'd shown me his bedroom. Life wasn't what I'd planned at 54, but it was mine. Every decision, every risk, every triumph, all mine. And for the first time since that humiliating day in David's fake office lobby, I wouldn't trade my reality for anyone else's fantasy. The truth, it turned out, really was better than the best lie. Thanks for listening. Don't forget to subscribe and feel free to share your story in the comments. Your voice matters.